Another case of Hindu swindling. Told you guys not to trust this charlatan. He just is really good at parroting all the right-wing talking points, but in this interview that he did with the New York Times recently, you can see what he's really about. Before you tell me I'm being racist, I am, but not right now. So
that how American you are is a function of how many generations your bloodline is tied to the United States of America.
So here he is, he's trying to fight against that. He's just part of the same movement that wants to displace white Americans and make it seem like, oh, American has always been this sort of nebulous topic. This is how you know this is bullshit, first of all. Let's just talk about how we know this is bullshit, okay? Because if Vivek were to go travel to another country, nobody's going to look at him and go, oh, there's an American here. But if a 6'2" white blonde-haired guy is walking through, they're going to be like, oh, that's an American. We all have an idea of what an American is, and it's not Vivek.
And I reject that view, actually. I think that a citizen is a citizen of this country, period. And I think if you have been born in this country, you pledge allegiance to this country, those ideals, whether it's one generation, two generation, or 10, there's not a spectrum of Americanness.
But you can't say that literally about any other country or culture. Go look at the data of economic contributions of immigrants versus native-born Americans. And you can even see this in European countries, right? Denmark, native Danes versus non-Western immigrants. And that's substantially lower. And then you have Western immigrants, which is almost as high as the Danes. So where your immigrants come from matters. And Vivek is trying to be like, oh, if you come here and you say I'm American, and you take the Pledge of Allegiance, you're a citizen, you're an American. Really? Okay. What's the primary demographic that has died fighting for America's rights, for America's causes? Tell you what, it's not Indian, and it's not any other kind of brown.
More of a blood and soil conception of American identity,
So then he wants to fight against this blood and soil idea, which actually is the only idea of nationality that makes any sense.
Is that you vest into how American you are based on how many generations your family and your lineage has been attached to the soil of this nation.
Yeah, how many people are in your Kentucky cemetery plot?
How many people are in your Kentucky cemetery? They always do this shit, where they try to make every person who wants to argue for the continuity of American identity like some redneck hick who's like, oh, how many people do you have in your Kentucky cemetery? Yeah, those are the people who actually built this country. Yeah, I know. Oh, no, the slaves built this country. The immigrants built this country. No, those are the people who built those countries. Okay? Because even when you had the waves of immigrants, they were coming for economic opportunities. Well, what economic opportunities were they coming from if there was nothing built here? Oh, right. Logic.
You know, and the blood and soil, you are inextricably linked to this land. On this view, you'll have the view, that people won't be willing to fight for abstractions or abstract ideals, but they will fight for their homeland.
Yeah, people aren't going to fight for children in general, but they'll fight for their kids.
I disagree with that.
This is J.D. Vance's convention speech.
Well, I think it's representative of a broader worldview in some segments of the NatCon world. And in my NatCon speech, I rejected that view because I actually think the American Revolution was fought for a set of abstract ideals, actually.
This bullshit argument that he makes that the American Revolution was fought for a set of abstract ideas. No, buddy, it wasn't abstract ideas. Also, Thomas Jefferson and co. were here generationally. They didn't just come here and then all of a sudden go, let's do a revolution.
I think Thomas Jefferson, the man who signed the Declaration of Independence, was swearing into existence a nation founded on those civic ideals. And that's exactly what was the war that led to the formation of this country. And in some cases, even the wars that we fought since, including the Civil War.
See, there we go. Here's an immigrant who has no idea about what the Civil War was fought over. No, the Civil War was fought over states' rights. That wasn't an abstract idea. The South felt like they were being imposed upon by the North, forced to do things that didn't agree with what their constituents wanted. They were fighting for their land, what they felt was their country. Okay, maybe you would know that if you studied beyond just a fifth grade textbook that has this two-dimensional view that the Civil War was fought for slavery.
On this question of Americanness and identity, this is the way national identities are normally built, right? So in some sense, the default presumption has to belong to this other side, the blood and soil vision. Like that has to be the default. We think about the national identity of Italy or the national identity of Japan. Right?
Which, by the way, they're trying to erase, right? Go look at the mass migrations into Europe. Look at what they're saying in Britain, right? Britain, all of a sudden, you could be British, even if you're generationally from Africa. You could be British, even if you're generationally from Pakistan. And this is total bullshit, because if that was true, if those people, that these immigrants that were coming into Britain really were British, then why aren't they blending into British society? Why do they continue to refuse to meld with the culture and instead live in parallel societies? They live in communities that are totally isolated and are 90% their ethnic group. They refuse to conform to the standards of British life. They're just there because, once again, they want the economic benefits of living in a European society without changing their culture. And this is why you know that these people are retarded, because if they had any sense of being able to reflect, they might say, wait a second, this culture that I'm rejecting built this society that I want to be a part of. Could it be that the society is an outspring of the culture? And therefore, could it be that the society that I just left, that was not giving me the opportunities that I needed, could be an outspring of my culture? And would it be a good idea to change and adapt in order to be more like the society that's building the things that I want? No, we must have Sharia law. We're going to wear hijabs. We're going to keep doing whatever retarded things we do in my country, and I just want your money. So this is why every native of their country has every right to reject these people and every right to say no. And anybody who says that you're being a bigot or a racist or wants to shame you because of that is just trying to manipulate you by making you feel bad or feel guilty by something that's actually a rightful feeling. So we're erasing all sense of European identity. By the way, this doesn't happen the other way, okay? You don't have Pakistan electing an Irish governor. You don't have India welcoming an Italian prime minister. So at this point, anybody who is still defending what Vivek is talking about here is part of the globalist agenda. And they are trying to weaken your very rightful claims to your country and your identity. And we all know what's going on, and we all know who's behind it.
The feedstock, the genetic stock, the lineage, the ancestry, that's what makes, just as a human being, viscerally, the way we're wired, tied to a nation, part of what gives that allegiance to the nation some meat, some substance, some heft, is that genetic bloodline tie. Like
Yes, it is. Why would it be any different for America? You just said that's what runs through us as human beings. This is the way we've been since, I don't know, thousands of years. And you think that would change just because we created this idea of America, which, by the way, is a relatively new concept. But because we have the memory of a goldfish in this country, we're not really allowed to know true history. We believe that everything we think now about what America is what everybody believed. And it's not. Go look at the documents of the founding fathers that he very, astutely uses to prove his point, but then ignores things that are inconvenient. They talked about having only white men. Shocker. Oh, you're going to ignore that part. Why would they do that? Why would they do that if they thought the concept of America was just this abstract idea that could be fluid depending on, who the constituents are? No, these were European men who came here to build a country for Europeans where they could practice without religious persecution.
That's just the way it's always been. So that has to be the default. Now, I think what made America unique, I would say exceptional, and this goes to the question of American exceptionalism and whether you believe it and it's possible, is that America wasn't that, actually.
You see the manipulative tactic? You see? This is what makes America special. We're not like that. Don't you want to be special? Shut up.
Broadly speaking, basically the only major nation in human history that was instead founded as a creedal nation.
They very clearly wrote that this society, this civilization, will only function as long as you have a moral population. And the idea of morality that the founding fathers had was Christian European men. It was completely beyond any conception. They didn't even imagine an idea in which you had a multicultural stock. Why? Well, your foundation of a moral population automatically would fall apart because, as we know, many of these cultures' morals clash entirely with a Western European Christian moral. Let's take Vivek's country. India was practicing sati, where they burned the widows. That was totally moral for them. Complete contrast to what was going on in Western civilization. And in fact, they would still be doing it to this day if the British hadn't gone there and outlawed it.
I think the blood and soil vision of American identity makes American exceptionalism impossible because Japan...
American exceptionalism basically existed only and up until the country was a predominantly white country.
You'd had this interaction with Ann Coulter where I guess she says to you, look, you're great, you're really impressive, but I wouldn't vote for you because you're, quote, an Indian.
You are so bright and articulate, and I guess I can call you articulate since you're not an American Black, but I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian.
Based. I've had enough with diversity, okay? Put the white men in charge.